So abstracting is a technical term within general semantics. And what we're talking about now is what we intend by the term abstracting within the discipline called general semantics. There's a lot of differences. In other words, if you look at abstracting in a dictionary, which I did just last week, you won't find many things that are congruent with what we're talking about. There are a couple of things, like the notion of selecting.
One big chunk. Any other way you would illustrate this? Okay. Remember the term self-reflexiveness? Okay. This map can be used to map, and we can use it to map this map. We can interpret this map in a vaguer way to help us understand it in a step-by-step way. Okay? So, let's divide this up into smaller steps. Now, what are some other terms you could use for study? Examination. Examination. Define.
Increments.
Increments. And here's one that, two that I got in, where was it? Willimantic, about 7 years ago. 8 years ago. Teensy Wincy.
Yeah.
It's a bitsy. It's a bitsy. It's a bitsy. Yeah. Okay, now. When you break things down into smaller steps, you can rearrange. You can create another structure.
over dinner, right? Yeah.
Every time I look over, I think, oh, I think, oh, you're fine. That's where it ends. Oh, yeah.
You had said, yeah, one time we were talking about it. You said, you want to blend it?
In 1946, when the Institute moved from Chicago to Lakeville, Connecticut, I went along, and that's how I came to Connecticut. Then, after Kodish died, I was there a few years, and I got married, and now I live in New York City with my husband, who is going to speak here on Thursday evening. Oh, I stay with the Institute. I'm on the Board of Trustees. I help with the bulletin. I was the director of the Institute for some years, in various times in 1970s and 80s. Well, but anyway, I'm still around and still working with the Institute and staying and enjoying the seminars.
Kodish was saying that we can't operate with the limited Aristotelian system. We need to go beyond that, and he wrote this book in order to show how to do so. He represented this process with this diagram, which shows the non-Aristotelian system as being more general, but containing the Aristotelian system as a special case. So here we correct for what he perceived to be inadequacies in Aristotle. But he's not saying, and this should not be used as an excuse for blathering. Logic, sharp logic is not sufficient. Remember, we made a distinction between valid and true. A statement can be valid but not true. It can be logically airtight and schizophrenic. Happens all the time. That's why schizophrenics are so hard to work with, just using verbal therapy, because they're usually better than the therapist at it. You know, sharp, very logical. The problem with the schizophrenic, from the verbal point of view, is that it's very difficult to get them to re-examine their premises. Their conclusions are usually quite in line with their premises. We'll talk about this later when we talk about logical faith. So the problem isn't with the reasoning process very often. The problem is that the premises are not true, and therefore the valid conclusions which derive from them are, to say the least, insufficient. The way we subsequently abstract, which will affect the way we abstract the verbal letters, descriptions that we make will influence our inferences, both inferences of direct sensing. But Krzyzewski's descriptions of what he intended by this diagram is also the activity of the system. In other words, the results, the output of the system feeds back into the system. So we can also, now that we've laid this out this way, we can also do this to realize that.
Show successive broader mappings starting there and going on into the solar system, the galaxy, and collections of galaxies, portion of the man's skin, and show successively smaller levels of structure going down into the molecular level, atomic level, subatomic level. So the film does a really excellent job in there.
Either Newton's law or let's see, if either Newton's law or some Mexican Indian whose name begins with X, if either of those is true, then Kepler's law will be true. We find Kepler's law. Does that mean Newton's law is true? Not necessarily. It could be X's law coming from NASA. Well, the data were extracted from observations But Newton is developing inference from that.
That's right. It's a step below.
Well, Newton, yeah, Newton's laws are.
I wish I could say that I had followed those developments of the 1920s at first hand, but that would be claiming too much because I was just in high school, graduated from high school in 1922. I then went on to take my BA at a small college in Iowa, living at home because I was, my father was teaching there and I lived on just in the family. And I was breaking away from the Baptist fundamentalism around me. Then I went down to the State University of Iowa at the age of 20 and got my MA in 1926, my first year away from home. Then did graduate work at Oxford University for 3 years. I was on a scholarship from 1928 to 31. There were the experiences there of learning another culture. But Oxford was not as stimulating as it might have been. One of my fellow Rhodes scholars, who was there a little before me, said that when he went to Oxford, he got into closed storage. Oxford at that time wanted to preserve the best of the civilization that was the status quo, really, so that it was when I came back to America that this burst of new energies of the intellectual ferment came to my attention. I went to the University of Chicago as a research worker in 1932 and then saw these developments when, of course, he was beginning the work from a perspective of looking at it from the immediately preceding years.
And I published a magazine in music. And my degree was in music, not science, you know. So it's peculiar. And all I can tell you is that I was not doing what I really wanted. Wonderful about the way
You have to take chances in life. I mean, that's what it's all about.
I think I can know.
Well, that's why me. But it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. We've met a lot of interesting people. A lot of friendships have developed. I'm sorry to see some of these people go back home. I really am.
Educational process.
linguistic general semantics can clarify our evaluations so that we can live a fulfilled life to the highest degree of our potentiality.